Welcome to the Infoverse. I'm the Infomancer speaking. This is part 2 of Races of Thorril, Plain Orcs. Now, excuse me looking down quite often. I'm sure you noticed in the last video I did have to look away once to refer to my notes. I do this completely unscripted, but I do have notes for what my orcs use, and all my races actually, and I refer to those rather than have to think of it and come up with it on the spot, so that way I don't miss anything that I came up with or have any sort of inconsistencies. So I will have to look down a lot more with this because this is a lot more in-depth. This is part 2, and as I said in the previous video, if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you go check it out before this one, because this is part 2, and it doesn't make sense to watch part 2 before part 1. Anyways, in this part 2, I'm going to be talking about the armor and the way the Plain Orcs fight. And I have to look at my notes a lot more because I made their armor and fighting style very, very unique to the Plain Orcs. I kind of based the way they work and fight on gladiators, and I looked into the Metatron and several others for research on what gladiator armor was like and how they fought, but the Metatron in specific. He had 3 great videos on gladiators, and you should go check them out if you haven't seen them yet. They're fantastic, and it worked really well for helping me figure out how to set up the armor for my orcs. And the reason I set up gladiator armor for them is that I just thought it seemed cool for a fantasy element. Yes, in real life, and I do want realism, but yes, in real life, you probably wouldn't go onto battlefields with gladiator armor, but if you're of low intelligence and you really value speed and stuff, and you're traveling a lot, so you don't want full armor on all the time like the cave orcs, it might make a little more sense then to fight in a little more gladiator-esque kind of armor, because it's going to cover you less and offer less protection, and that is a huge detriment on the battle and why it wouldn't be done. But if you're always moving, it's covering you less, it's weighing you down less, it's going to be easier for you to go on your long nomadic marches. And if you also value speed in battle as a culture, which my Plain Orcs do, then it is all that much better to be only partly armored because it allows greater freedom of movement. And I also chose another reason. Their culture is one that very much values strength, courage, bravery, and scars earn you respect. They want to be scarred in battle. They don't want you to die, of course. They want to live just like anybody, but they want big, grisly scars because a scar is proof. My enemy struck me, and I survived. I am that strong. That is what their scars say, and it earns you a lot of respect. Even if you've been alive for 500 years and you've never been scarred in battle, and you've been in hundreds of battles, and you're just that good that you've never been touched, you would have less respect than an orc that had been alive for 20 years and had only seen 2 battles but had 3 big scars on him, because his scars proved his strength. You just proved that yes, you have good fighting skill, and that does earn you respect in their culture to an extent, but without the strength and the courage and the bravery to back it up that the scars prove, you're not as well respected. And so that wouldn't necessarily be the case in real life, but if they're stupid and that's the way they think, it very much helps with why they would have gladiator style armor. And I think that makes it a little more interesting for a fantasy element if you have an entire race that fights and only partially armored, and they're big and brutal and greatly feared, and I just think that that adds a fantastical element to the fantasy story. And with setting it up the way I have and giving the reasons I have, I've still managed to keep realism to it. There is still fantasy elements, just like with their serrated weapons and stuff, as I said in the previous video, but at the same time, I've included realism, and that's important. Sorry about that short interruption. Now I'm back. So let's get into what their armor is going to be. And obviously it's going to be only partly armored since they have gladiator-esque style. So in addition to the armor and the gladiator style, I also looked into some video games as inspiration. And so when I set up their army and fighting style, when I did the dwarves, I kind of did it as a uniformity thing. The orcs are more, the plain orcs at least, are more split up. And there are specific sections to their army. The first section, you have plain orc archers. You also have plain orc clubbers, plain orc shredders, and plain orc crushers. And each of these classes is going to be excuse me. Each of these classes is going to be armored differently and armed differently. So it's going to, that's why I said if I did the previous video and this one mixed, it would be just way too long. So let's start out with our plain orc archers. Now, of course, plain orc archers are going to be the orcs with the bows. And contrary to what most archers would have been like in reality and in real life, these archers don't actually carry any sidearms with them if somebody gets too close. Instead, they tend to stick close to other soldiers of the orcish army and groups and raiding parties that are armed, so that if they get in trouble, they can call out for help or they can rush to their allies, and they will deal with the melee combat. So that's a little unrealistic, but being stupid, it might fit them a little better than having a sidearm and being prepared, because they're too stupid to think ahead. So that helps some, but let's go into what they have. They, of course, have a war bow or a long bow, you know, something they can draw back and shoot. They are an archer. Because they're an archer and because of their role, they end up serving as snipers. At first, they will attack their enemy from a long distance, but as their soldiers and the orcish soldiers collide, you can't just fire randomly into the enemy group anymore. So they become snipers instead of just normal archers. They will pick out specific targets, looking for anybody who looks particularly powerful, anybody who looks like they are taking a leading role, anybody that is overpowering an orc in battle, and they will snipe off those people. So because of this, they need really good visibility. And so a longbowman or a warbowman will not have a helmet. An orcish archer does not wear a helmet at all. And for their body, because they need to constantly turn to the side and move around like this to find their enemy and to shoot, they need a lot of movement in their body. So they actually have only a soft leather breastplate. And when I say soft leather breastplate, I mean like picture leather pants. Alright, now make it into a muscle shirt. That's what they're wearing. That is their chest armor. Real effective, right? Yeah, not necessarily realistic, but it works since they need the movement and stuff, and they want scars and stuff. Kind of works for them, and maybe it's a little thicker than leather pants. I mean, I may be dumbing it down, the strength of it a little, but really, really flexible and movable and stuff. That's the idea. So they've got their chest piece. They've got no armor or on their hands or on their arms. And this is so they've got full movement of their hands and arms. They can draw their arrows, they can shoot, whatever. And so they don't they've got no head protection, no arm and hand protection, basically no protection on their body. They're barely better than naked right now. And this is how they go into battle. This is just unbelievable for an entire culture to fight this way in real society. And so it loses some realism. But I've already explained the reasons they picked this and to build some realism in there. It doesn't make up for everything, but this is fantasy, so it brings the gap a little closer and makes it a little better. As far as their lower half, because they need protection, all the orcs, you will notice there is a theme. To protect their thighs and their groin and their buttocks, they wear loincloths that have leather straps like that thick, you know, like half an inch to maybe an inch thick. And these leather straps hang down to various lengths depending on the class. And that is their protection for their groins and buttocks and upper legs, thighs. And in real life, you do have some cases of things like this, but you'd want much better protection in all reality in a world where there is plate mail and stuff, and there is plate mail in my world, so realistically they would want to come up with something better, but again, they're stupid, so we gotta dumb them down some. And it helps with fighting the orcs. You see, the orcs are stronger than humans, they're faster. Their only detriment is that they're stupider, and so to make it a little easier for a human to be able to best an orc, they've got poor armor. That makes it a little easier to have the idea of the human can beat the orc, even though the orc is superior. So, to protect their legs, their upper legs, their groins, and their buttocks, they have, of course, the loincloth with leather straps. Their leather straps are mid-thigh length, and so they only go halfway down their leg, so half of their leg is covered, or half of their thighs is covered, their groin is covered, their buttocks is covered, but half of their thighs is uncovered. And like I said, that is their coverage for their legs, so since they don't have anything lower than that, the lower half of their thigh is completely exposed. But that allows good movement for them, and at least the leather straps they have are studded, so it's a little more likely to stop a weapon for what it does protect, at least. And they don't have any knee or feet protection, and the lack of knee protection is for the increased movement. The lack of foot protection is just because you will find it is a thing in Orcish society, plain Orcish society anyways, that they don't wear any sort of foot protection no matter what class they are or who they are. They don't cover their feet. They like to touch the ground. And so, no foot protection. They do have greaves on their shins. Kind of thin greaves, but still greaves. And that's pretty much their protection. You see, they got shin protection, they got protection for their groin and upper thighs, and very, very little chest protection, but some chest protection. That's it. So they did need something else, I felt. And so what I gave them was a hoodless cloak. And now, a hoodless woolen cloak isn't a whole lot of protection. It's a little bit, especially if you think they might be fighting other other orcs who have serrated weapons also. So the serrations might get caught in the wool, and then it would seem more like an effective armor to them. And being stupid, they might then think, yeah, this is a more effective armor, since they're testing it on serrated weapons. So they gave them a hoodless cloak. Hoodless because they don't want them to cover up their head to protect themselves from rain or wind or whatever and decrease their visibility. So no hood allowed on their cloak. But at least it covers their body and legs and offers them a little more protection than they had, if only slightly more. It's still a little more. And as I said, how they fight is they at first launch their arrows into the enemies, and as the enemies and the orcs draw closer, they then take on a role of sniper and stay close to other Orcish soldiers so that the Orcish soldiers can defend them if they get attacked. And that's the way the archers fight. Very poorly armed, but they never see any real combat. Even if they get attacked, they run away to another orc who will take care of the combat for them. So they don't need a whole lot of armor anyways. Next is the plain orc clubber. And I like the plain orc clubber. This is the only orc, or the only plain orc, to use a shield. And not just any shield. They use a big square shield like you imagine the ancient Spartans wearing. Not what they really wore, but what you imagine them wearing. But of course, being a clubber, they have a wooden club. As I said in the previous video, sometimes this is spiked, sometimes not. If you want to know more about why, check out that video. After that, they've got the rectangular shield that they'd wear on their off arm, protecting pretty much everything, and big protection, good, strong shield, really nice. And unlike the plain orcs who had no helmet because they need good visibility, this is their one of their two big armor classes. So they've got a much better helmet. They've got a helmet to begin with, which makes it much better. But not just any kind of helmet. They've got a nice, full, closed-face helm like you would see on a gladiator with the holes poked out for the eyes or whatever, and really limits what you can see, but offers a lot of protection. And so that's what they have. They also would have large pauldrons on their shoulders, and when I say large, I mean like big and sticking up and offer protection from the sides for the neck and stuff, instead of just, flat on the shoulder, big sticking up kind of things. And this wouldn't be everywhere, though. They wouldn't have it on both arms. Their large pauldron would be on their shield arm, and only their shield arm. The other arm would not have a pauldron. And the reason for this is that when they go into battle, they've got the shield held forward. They're holding it a little down to protect their legs and stuff and their body, so their head has the helmet, their neck is here. They've got the pauldron there. They're lined up against you. So you've got a wall of armor for the upper body. You've got a helmet, you've got a pauldron, and a huge shield. They don't need to protect the other side as much because they don't present that to the enemy as much. However, they do, of course, have to strike with their club, and so they do expose their arm to the enemy sometimes. And because of this, this arm is behind a shield, so has no armor. However, the club arm does have plate protection going along the entire arm, and this is because they are exposing this arm sometimes. It doesn't have a shield protecting it, so they need some protection. They still don't have hand protection, which is just something that you will find is common among orcs. They just don't really protect hands and feet for some reason. It's not always the case, but it is common. So they've got plate protection on their clubbing arm. They've got a good helmet. They've got a pauldron. Got a good square, large shield. As I said, as you work your way down then, you have to come across a loincloth, because that is what protects their groin and buttocks and whatever. And their loincloth has knee-length leather straps, but they're not studded, so they're not as good as the archer straps at stopping attacks, but they do cover more. They go all the way down to the knee. And so it's arguable which one of these is the better choice. But that's what they have. As far as their legs, their legs, I've already covered the thighs. As far as their lower legs, they do have a very large, heavy greave. A greave. They don't do both legs, just like they didn't do both shoulders. They only greave up the leg, their left leg, most likely, that they're going to be presenting to the enemy with their shield. They got their shield here. They're turned kind of sideways, ready to strike you with their club back here. Here, I can use this to simulate the club at least. I don't got nothing for a shield, but they got their thing back here. They got their shield in front of you. They're turned sideways. So they've got this side of their body to you. So they've got a large pauldron here. They've got their helmet on. No armor on this arm because there's a shield. This arm's armored. They've got their thigh protection, their leather straps, and then a big, huge greave. A big, heavy, very big one on their leg that they're presenting up towards you so that they have protection on that side. And they have no hand protection or foot protection, like I said. I didn't give them any knee protection. And I'm sure you noticed I skipped over the torso. This is because they don't cover their torso at all. They feel so confident in their shield and in their protection of... They feel so confident in the shield, they feel they don't need a body armor, and so confident in being able to turn sideways and use the armor, the thick, heavy armor they're presenting to the enemy, that they don't really feel the need to armor the other side much. It's got very minimal protection. And they leave their body completely open. Imagine how brave that says they are, and that's something the society likes. Even though they've got a shield, and that takes away some of the braveness, I go out there with a bare chest and invite the enemy to stab me through the heart. None of them have done it yet. You'd get quite a bit of respect for that, wouldn't you? Yeah. So that is how the plain orc clubbers work. They go, and how they fight, since now you know how they're armored, is they go in a shield kind of wall. They put enough orc here and an orc here, and you see there's enough space in between the two that there's another orc which is spaced one person back. So it's not an exact shield wall, very different than a normal shield wall, but it gives them the movement, freedom of movement to swing their clubs and stuff. Since they're not using spears to thrust, they need room to swing. And the shield wall is at least somewhat effective at breaking up charges and stuff, since they do have to stop at the enemies that are holding shields in front of them. Not as good as a real shield wall, but it's what they use. Next you have the plain orc shredder, which is actually my favorite ones. These are dual-wielding orcs, so no shield for them, of course. And what they dual-wield is an axe in their offhand and a sword in their main hand. And as I stated before, these are going to be serrated weapons, and that's why it's the shredder. They hit you with these serrations, and they pull or they push, and it just shreds you. So they've got their weapons. They wear an open face helm, so they do have some head protection, but they've got more visibility than the clubber. Less head protection than the clubber, but more visibility. And they've got these two weapons, which are just awesome the way I picture them. I just think about how awesome it is to think about how awesome if they can just stab down into your armor with these things and shred it in a single pull. That's terrifying. And that's why the shredders are completely terrifying. But so they've got an open face helmet. They've got plate protection and a gauntlet on their axe arm. So this is a case where they do have hand protection. And they have no protection on their sword arm. And the reason for this is that you've got a crossguard, a hilt. If I'm holding, I don't even need to give an example. I don't even need to pretend. Here's an example. If I'm holding the handle, this is kind of small, but you can see I've got a protection here that's meant to stop something from hitting my hand. Right? I could get another example, but it's not accessible. I happen to have these by me right now. So this will work. Just imagine it's longer. They expect that they can stop a weapon with that. If this isn't an arm, but a crossguard, weapon comes down, they can stop it with that. So they don't need protection on their arm. They can protect it with their weapon. It's much harder to parry and block with an axe. So they put a gauntlet and plate armor on their arm. This protects them quite a bit. They don't have any... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to go in order with my notes, right? Otherwise I'll get confused. So, they don't have any pauldrons. They do have their axe arm protection, no sword arm protection, no pauldrons, but decent helmet. So you're getting kind of an idea of what they look like so far if you're seeing them in battle. Again, this is going to be something that doesn't have a whole lot of chest protection. In fact, again, you're going to see none. Maybe some leather straps that go across, kind of like you'd see with a gladiator, that kind of covers one side of the chest or whatever, but not much. So not much chest protection. Again, they are exposing themselves to the enemy and inviting scars. And this is less likely with them than the clubbers in real life, because they don't have the shield to make up for their lack of chest protection. But they're stupid. They like scars, whatever. So it kind of fits with the fantasy idea. And as far as their leg protection, they have loincloths with knee-length studded leather straps. So not only do they have the knee-length straps, the full thigh protection, like the plain orc clubbers, they have taken from the archers and studded these straps to offer even more protection. So even though they are leaving their chest exposed, they have more heavily armored their thighs and legs to make up for this. And yes, their legs too, because they have medium-sized greaves, not as big as the clubbers, but much larger than the archers. And they have these on both legs to protect them. They also have knee plates to protect their knees. The first orcs among the classes that offer protection for their knees. And this is important because if a knee is taken out, you can't move. So this is really smart for them. This is a really good move for them to protect their knees at least. Again, no hand protection on the sword arm, no foot protection, and really no torso protection. Maybe some leather straps, maybe not. It varies between if they have what they want and their personal desire. And the way they fight is they're kind of what you imagine the fantasy berserkers to be. They go rushing in crazy wild formations, hacking into the enemy with their serrated weapons, shredding armor, shredding bones, splitting people open, and just going wild. And because they don't have chest protection, you will see quite a few of them fall in battle, but you will see they're able to parry and block things pretty well with their axe arm because it's completely protected and has a greave in the axe. They've got their sword to attack with, and their legs, at least, are really protected, so you can't stop them from moving, at least. They've got a helmet, so you can't take out their head. Your only option is their body. And if they know the only option you have is to attack their body, it's going to be pretty easy to know where you're attacking and how to defend themselves. So they just go in and go crazy, and very, very feared. They are the berserkers of the Orcish people. The Orcish shredders are shredders, crazy wild people. And all that leaves now is the plain orc crushers. And the crushers are the ones that are wielding the two-handed maces and morning stars. And boy, are these things scary. These are the super heavily armored orcs. They leave almost nothing exposed. And contrary to their societal norms and standards and beliefs, they are very heavily armed. And the reason for this is they are the reserve troops that are meant to go in if the orcs are losing. They are the last line of defense. Alright, nobody else can get past you, we're going to send in the tanks. And that's the idea behind them. So they've got their two-handed mace or Morningstar, and they've got an open-face helm like the Shredder. So they have good head protection, but not as good as the Clubber. However, they get much more visibility. They wear two large pauldrons to protect their heads and their shoulders, because, as I said, they're heavily armored, and when I say large, I mean big ones that are going to go up to like ear level on the side, just ridiculous things that really kind of restrict movement a lot. But, like I said, these are their tanks that are held in reserve for emergencies. They've got a half breastplate, and when I say a half breastplate, I don't mean it covers the front and not the back. I mean, they're kind of stupid. They've made a breastplate that cuts off at the ribs, so their stomach is completely exposed, where you've got all them nice organs or whatever, your intestines and your stomach and gallbladder and whatever, all that's left exposed without any armor on it. But they do at least cover the lungs and the rib cage and chest and heart and whatever. That's covered in a good plate mail armor. So again, much more armored than the others who had a soft leather bodyguard or a couple of leather straps or nothing. They've at least covered half of it. They've got their pauldrons, they've got their helmet. So they're looking pretty good and armored. On top of that, they've got plate armor over their arms, covers. It would be like a sleeve that they pull up that has plates positioned on it. A plate along here, a plate along here, a plate here. They also plate the bottom. One thing you will notice is that despite how heavily armored they are, their hands are still unarmored. The only gauntlets you are going to see is going to be one gauntlet on the defensive arm of the Shredder. So still no gauntlets here, but pretty heavily armored so far, aren't they? This is, yes, it's less armored than a normal human and would be easier to kill because their stomach's exposed and they've left their hands exposed and their face and whatever. But you can see this is going to be much harder to kill than the Archer or the Shredder. Then after their plate arms and their breastplate, you gotta go down to the lower half. Again, they have a loincloth with leather straps, as I said, all the orcs do. And they only went to mid-thigh with theirs. They did go with studded leather straps, but only mid-thigh, so pretty much the same loincloths that are being used by the archers are used by their tanks. And this is a little odd for them, since they are the heavily armored ones that are the tanks. However, I chose to do this because this is the society that likes scars and courage and bravery, so they wanted to leave something open. Not just their stomach and hands, they wanted a little more at least. So half their thighs are left open and undefended, while the other half is defended with studded leather straps, so even better than what the Clubbers went with. After that, you've got large greaves, the Clubbers' greaves, that they only have one of on their defensive leg. The tanks, the Crushers, not Clubbers, Crushers, have these large greaves on each leg to protect their shins. However, they don't have the knee protection. They left their knees and thighs open, or knees and lower thighs open, but they do got the big greaves on their shins. And no foot protection, of course, and I've already said no stomach protection, so there's no more to cover with what they're wearing. They've got their helmet, pauldrons, got their arms, no hands. They got their chest, but not their stomach. They've got their groin, buttocks, and upper thighs. Got their shins covered. Pretty heavily armored dudes, and they're wielding big, heavy, crushing, two-handed maces and Morningstars. These would be absolutely terrifying to see marching at you. You see, oh, I've got very little options to attack them at, and they are very well armored, so I can't hit them anywhere but the few options I have, and they have these big crushing weapons that can break through my armor or crush my skull and bones, and it's just not a good time. And like as I said, the way they work is they are the reserve troops. They move in after the crazy orc shredders and clubbers and archers have been pretty much beaten and are retreating. You will send in the crushers to clean up the mess and make sure everything still goes good. And that is part 2 of my Races of Thorril Plain Orcs videos. Now you know what kind of armors they use along with their weapons and how they use them, and why they're kind of gladiator-esque, and how I tied realism into it, despite the fact that more so than with the dwarves, these are a more fantastical race. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you leave a like below. Let me know what you think about the way they function and the way they look, and if you can imagine an army of these things coming at you, what that would be like for you. Anyways, I'll see you next time here at the Infoverse, on whatever videos I choose to do here at the Infinite Realm, where anything can happen. I'll see you next time.